July the 8th, 1982, the day Saddam Hussein escaped death. His convoy drove into the town of Dujail, north of Baghdad. He moved amongst the people with little overt security apart from his bulletproof car. But a few hours after these displays of ritual loyalty, the would-be assassins made their move.
Let's start at the end. Not the real end, just the part that made headlines. It's December 13, 2003. The village is called Ad-Dor, somewhere in the dead heart of Iraq, but not far from Tikrit, Saddam Hussein's hometown. The air is still, the power's been cut, but not because of war or some freak accident. It's been done deliberately, like a curtain being drawn before a show. American soldiers are sweeping in under cover of that blackout. Hundreds of them, and they're not here for a siege. They're here for a single man. The scene looks like nothing. A forgotten farm shack, dried grass, broken bricks, a rope sticking out of the ground. A soldier yanks the rope. A piece of styrofoam peels back. It's a lid, a trapdoor. The man inside has been underground for hours, maybe longer. There's no ventilation, no escape route, no exit plan if this goes wrong, and it's about to go wrong. One of the soldiers prepares to throw in a grenade. That's the standard drill when you find a suspicious hole in Iraq in 2003. But before the pin is pulled, two hands shoot up from the darkness, then a head, then a voice. My name is Saddam Hussein. I am the president of Iraq, and I want to negotiate. Let that sink in. This man, who once had gold-plated rifles and 100-foot statues built in his honor, is now popping up from what's essentially a dirt coffin and asking to cut a deal. The soldier doesn't answer. I mean, he doesn't have to. A few hours later, Paul Bremer, the top U.S. administrator in Iraq, steps to a podium and says the now famous words, "Ladies and gentlemen, we got him."
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
But that scene only makes sense if you know what led up to it. And what led up to it was a 6-month hunt full of dead ends, bad intelligence, and a complete failure to read the man they were looking for. The U.S. invasion of Iraq began in March 2003. Officially, it was about weapons of mass destruction. Unofficially, it was about fear, revenge, and the naive belief that if you remove the tyrant, the people will thank you. President George W. Bush went on live TV and framed it as a mission to liberate Iraq and defend the world from grave danger. Vice President Cheney was certain. There is no doubt Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Except there was plenty of doubt, and eventually there were no weapons. Just empty bunkers and regret, but the invasion didn't wait for confirmation. Within 3 weeks, Baghdad fell. Saddam's regime collapsed in real time. People looted government buildings. The military dissolved overnight. And in Firdos Square, American troops helped Iraqis topple a statue of Saddam. A U.S. flag was draped over the face. The image spread around the world. It's liberation or occupation, depending on who you asked. And yet, Saddam himself had vanished. Not captured, not killed, just gone. And that made him dangerous. Because in the Arab world, leaders don't just disappear. They get martyred, or they come back. So the U.S. military turned the hunt into a game, literally. They printed a deck of playing cards with the faces of Iraq's most wanted. Saddam was the ace of spades. His sons, Uday and Qusay, were right behind him. Soldiers played poker with them. The cards were a joke, but the manhunt wasn't. They searched everywhere. Air raids, ground raids, tip-offs from unreliable locals. The CIA and elite units like Task Force 20 were dispatched to dig through half-burned cities and half-baked intel, And then, something real. In July, a man in Mosul walked into a U.S. base and said Uday and Qusay were hiding in his house. Nobody believed him, and it sounded like a trap, but they checked anyway. Lo and behold, it wasn't a trap. It was a firefight. The brothers refused to surrender. The U.S. surrounded the building. A missile was fired into the home. When the dust settled, Uday and Qusay were dead. This was supposed to be the turning point. The regime's heirs were gone. The bounty, $15 million each, had worked. And shortly after, an audio tape was released of Saddam mourning his sons. The message was clear. He was alive, he was listening, and he was still out there. But here's where the story starts to feel like it's circling the drain. After that tape, months passed. The raids kept coming. The task force wrecked entire neighborhoods looking for him. Innocent people got caught in the crossfire. The military had a strategy, and the strategy was brute force. Break the doors, rattle the cages, someone will talk. No one did. The problem was they were looking for Saddam the way you look for a general, high-ranking officials, military compounds, government bunkers. But Saddam wasn't a general anymore. He was a fugitive. He wasn't calling shots. He was hiding. Enter Eric Maddox, staff sergeant, not a SEAL, not a commando. Just an intelligent guy who knew how to talk to people. Maddox had a theory. Everyone else was focused on Saddam's political allies. The ministers, the generals, the guys in the deck of cards. But they were all has-beens. Their power died when Saddam lost his. Maddox focused on Saddam's bodyguards, specifically the Hamaya, the elite group that stayed close to him at all times. These weren't politicians. They weren't public figures. They were shadows. And shadows, Maddox figured, don't go far when the man they're guarding is still alive. He started digging in Tikrit, Saddam's hometown. And that's when he found a name. Muhammad Ibrahim Omar al-Muslit. Old school, trusted, part of the inner circle, but now running a resistance cell, funding insurgent attacks. If anyone knew where Saddam was, it was him. But Muhammad Ibrahim had disappeared. So Maddox started pulling threads. He interrogated Muhammad's relatives, found a nephew. That led to a driver. That led to 2 business associates. One of them gave up the name of Muhammad's son, Muslit. Muslit wasn't part of the resistance. He didn't know anything about troop movements or safe houses, but he remembered one thing. His father liked to fish at a pond in Samarra. That sounds like nothing. But Maddox remembered something else. Saddam had a favorite dish, maskouf, a grilled river fish. He used to eat it fresh, right after it was caught. A fish pond. In the middle of a war. It was something. They followed it and the pond led them to 2 fishermen. One of them, as it turned out, had a cousin with a house in Baghdad. The logic was flimsy, but the options were running out. They raided the house, and inside, Muhammad Ibrahim. No guns, no shootout, no resistance. Just the man they'd been tracing for weeks, sitting right there. Still, catching him wasn't the end. He had to talk. Maddox offered him protection for him and his family. And that cracked him open. Saddam was in Ad-Dor, living under the radar, protected by almost no one. Just a man, dirt, and silence. The troops moved in. The rope was pulled, the hole opened, and out came the last dictator of Iraq, blinking into the light. They pulled him out of the hole like a man being reborn. Except nothing about him suggested power or rebirth. Saddam Hussein, once the Lion of Baghdad, was blinking like a mole dragged into daylight. He looked like a man who had been living underground because he had. Scruffy beard, greasy hair, disoriented eyes, no iron suit, no sunglasses, no firing a rifle from a balcony, just a disheveled man, blinking in defeat. But even in this moment, optics mattered. The Americans staged it all carefully. Photos were taken, video was recorded, and journalists were invited to see the so-called spider hole. A doctor checked his scalp, another looked inside his mouth. One scene showed Saddam opening wide while a flashlight shone on his teeth. It wasn't about medicine, it was theater. This wasn't just a manhunt ending. This was a myth being dismantled, frame by frame. For decades, Saddam had carefully built his image: strongman, revolutionary, Arab hero. His face was on every wall in Iraq. His name appeared in every school book. Songs were written about him. His voice was broadcast daily on state radio. He wasn't just a president. He was the father of the nation, the warlord in a business suit, the survivor of 1,000 coup attempts. And now, he looked like someone's uncle who got lost in the desert. The goal was clear: make it unambiguous. Show Iraqis and the world that this man wasn't in control anymore. The dictator who once terrified the region couldn't even defend the entrance to his own hole. Within hours of the announcement, Baghdad exploded, not with celebration, but with confusion. Although some people danced, others cried. Some refused to believe it was really him. Others feared what came next. Because here's what no one talks about. For many Iraqis, even those who hated Saddam, his capture meant instability. When a strongman disappears, power doesn't flow into freedom, it flows into chaos. And chaos came quickly. While American officials were patting themselves on the back, things on the ground got worse. Saddam was gone, but no one knew what to do next. The Iraqi military had been dissolved. The civil service was gutted. The old Ba'ath party networks were dismantled, then replaced by nothing. There was no plan for the day after. Power vacuums have a funny way of filling themselves. Militias formed, extremists moved in. Old tribal rivalries reawakened, and the U.S., expecting gratitude, found resistance instead. Not from Saddam loyalists, but from Iraqis who now had to navigate a broken country with no clear future. Saddam, meanwhile, was being interrogated. The U.S. didn't torture him, at least not physically, but they played the long game: isolation, repetition, psychological pressure. He was kept in a secret location near Baghdad International Airport, known to insiders as Camp Crubber. They asked about weapons. He insisted there were none. They asked about links to Al-Qaeda. He denied them all. He mocked Osama bin Laden, called him a fanatic, said they were enemies, not allies. It turned out Saddam had been bluffing for years. He wanted his neighbors and the West to think he had to amends. That's what kept Iran cautious. But inside Iraq, there was nothing left. It was a con, one that worked until it didn't. In July 2004, Saddam was handed over to the new Iraqi interim government. Not released, obviously, but symbolically transferred. That same day, he appeared before an Iraqi judge for the first time in public. The footage is eerie. He looks older now, not just tired, changed, but still defiant. The judge reads the charges. Saddam scoffs. He refuses to recognize the court, refers to himself as the president of Iraq, accuses the U.S. of invading illegally. But this wasn't a debate. It was a trial, and it was going forward. The first charges weren't about USvsIraq or wars. They were about a small village called Dujail. In 1982, Saddam survived an assassination attempt there. In response, he ordered the massacre of over 140 sheep men and boys. Homes were destroyed. Families vanished. It wasn't war. It was revenge. The Dujail case was selected for one reason. It was clean. There were documents, witnesses, survivors. The lawyers wouldn't have to prove war crimes or foreign policy blunders. They just had to prove murder. The trial dragged on for months. Saddam used the courtroom as a stage. He gave speeches, argued with judges, denied everything, then admitted things he thought would scare people. It was half defense, half performance. And behind the scenes, Iraq was unraveling. The insurgency escalated. Al-Qaeda in Iraq gained ground. Bombings became routine. Sectarian killings exploded. The war had shifted, and the man on trial was no longer the most dangerous figure in the country. He was a symbol, and symbols are disposable. On November 5, 2006, Saddam was found guilty of crimes against humanity in the Dujail massacre. The sentence: death by hanging. He appealed, of course. The appeal was denied, and then the date was set: December 30th, 2006. It was the first day of Eid al-Adha, one of the holiest days in Islam. They hanged him just before dawn. The execution was filmed, supposedly for record keeping. But the video leaked, and what people saw wasn't dignity or justice. It was a chaotic scene, full of shouting and sectarian slurs. Saddam stood on the gallows, refused to hood, and said a prayer. Then the floor dropped. The footage was grainy, but the message was crystal clear. The Iraqi state had killed its former ruler, and done it in a way that felt more like vengeance than law. So what's left of Saddam now? He was buried in Al-Ajah, his birthplace. His tomb was bombed in later years. His Ba'ath party is gone. His face is no longer on the walls. His statues have all been torn down. But the damage he did lives on. So does the damage that followed him. The American invasion that was supposed to bring democracy brought a decade of war. Saddam's capture didn't end the violence. It simply changed the names of the players. First came Al-Qaeda, then came ISIS, then came proxy wars. The man in the spider hole was gone, but the hole he left behind was still open. If you enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.